Nostalgia, a sentimental longing or wistful affection for the past, typically for a period or place with happy personal associations. What am I nostalgic for? How about automobiles, cars? I love seeing those vintage car shows. It's great to see that history and to remember how far we've come with transportation. But I remember that first automobile that we had in our family when I was young was a Ford Falcon, I think in 1961. It was all black and it had no air conditioning. That car was unusable on summer days. Back then, cars did not have seat belts. My father was one of the first people to add seat belts to his car, and people thought he was nuts. Cars were not very safe back then. By the 1970s, you started to see seat belts everywhere in cars, but the only other real safety feature was the size of your car. And we were getting these huge gas guzzler vehicles. They were not fun to drive. We always had Ford LTDs. I honestly say that our 2012 Toyota Yaris is hands down the best car I've ever had. I can remember in the late 1960s going north on 95 to visit relatives in New York. We'd come across that area in Newark, New Jersey, where the factories were. Oh my God, the pollution. We would hold our breath, roll up the windows, turn on the air, and try not to breathe. It was that bad. And I wondered how people could live around there or let alone work in that area and not be very, very sick. Something happened this year. April, I went for a walk with the dog, my usual walk, and I noticed something was different, but it really hit home when I came to this corner. About 7 to 10 blocks down, there's a traffic light. I usually can't really see that traffic light, but today I looked up, it looked like it was right in front of me. And then I realized, clean air. The planes hadn't been flying for a month. I'm certainly not nostalgic about television. My youth could have really done without Bewitched and I Dream of Jeannie and those horribly insulting commercials. I remember if there was something I really wanted to see on television, like, let's say, a really good music act on Ed Sullivan, I would have to watch an hour of crooners, Broadway singers, cleaned up Borscht Belt comedians, and horrible commercials, and then I would get 2 to 3 minutes of the act that I tuned in for. A lot of us are very nostalgic about vinyl records. We have fond memories of going to record stores and flipping through the records and reading the album covers and looking at the artwork. It was a treasure hunt because you might hear a really good song on the radio, go and look for the LP. You'd buy the LP, bring it home, and that song you heard on the radio is the only decent song on the LP. Then you try to trade or sell it, and you're stuck if you damage the record at all. I warped quite a few records by leaving them too long on the back seat of a car. Well, here's something I might be nostalgic for. Up until the 1980s, newspapers were the centerpiece of daily life here in the U.S. In Baltimore, we had the Morning Sun, the Evening Sun, multiple editions of the News American, and the enormous Sunday edition of the weekend newspaper. Everyone would pass around different sections of the paper, each person eagerly waiting for their turn to read the next part of the paper. Journalism was much valued, and because much of the population was well educated, the standards were very high. If you want to find out anything about 20th century history, I'd advise you to find the newspaper for the time you're interested in. If I compare today with 1970, and I look at the violence, the technologies available, the political strife, even though we're in the middle of the worst pandemic in 100 years, I would choose today. Sure, there was a lot of great music back then, but I had trouble accessing it back then. Today, I'm hearing the music from back then on YouTube, full concerts I thought I would never hear. But virtually in every category, we find things are truly better today than they were at that time. Think about it. Until next time, Josh, 3 times a week I come to you for 5 minutes. Let me know if there's something you want me to talk about. Have a great week.